A woman dialed 911 over a suspicious jogger. The response she got shattered her assumptions and left her speechless. It was the kind of afternoon that made time feel slower, like the world had taken a deep breath and decided, just for a moment, to be kind. The late-day sun stretched across the sky, low and warm, casting golden shadows through the thick canopy of oak and maple trees that lined both sides of the street. The leaves flickered gently in the breeze like they were waving to the day as it passed. Children's laughter rang out in the distance, bright and carefree, echoing faintly from someone's backyard. A sprinkler spun lazily in one front lawn, tossing arcs of water into the air that caught the sunlight just right, creating tiny, flickering rainbows. Somewhere behind a closed window, soft music hummed from a radio, Motown, maybe, or old-school soul. The neighborhood was the kind you'd see in a glossy real estate magazine: white picket fences, freshly mowed lawns, wind chimes swaying on porches, and into that soft, suburban stillness ran a man. He moved with purpose, but not in a rush. His pace was controlled, steady. Each footfall landed with quiet precision on the pavement, his breathing a gentle rhythm that matched the bounce of his stride. His gray hoodie was soaked dark at the collar and down the back from sweat, clinging to his shoulders. Faded athletic, shorts hung just past his knees, and his sneakers, though worn, still cushioned each step with the quiet confidence of someone who'd run this route many times before. His name was Marcus. Tall, lean, with the kind of strength that didn't need to be announced. His skin glistened beneath the afternoon sun, and his eyes were focused straight ahead, calm, alert, but not tense. Just present. To him, this was more than just a run. Was a ritual. Each step was a way to let go of the noise he couldn't control. The headlines, the sideways glances, the pressure of always needing to appear non-threatening. Out here, with the wind on his face and the sun on his back, he could exist on his own terms. He didn't have to explain anything to anyone. He passed a row of neatly trimmed hedges. A black Labrador barked behind a white fence but didn't seem particularly interested. An elderly man waved from a porch swing, and Marcus raised a hand. In return, a silent nod of respect. A couple pushing a stroller paused to let him pass, offering polite smiles. He nodded again, courteous but reserved. There was a peace to this neighborhood, but it wasn't always shared equally. Marcus had lived this. He knew how delicate that peace was for someone like him. Even here, even now, the quiet could break in an instant. Still, he kept running. Not with fear, but with knowing. There was power in motion, in showing up, in being seen. He turned onto Maplewood Drive, where the street curved slightly downhill. His shadow stretched out in front of him, long and lean. Birds chirped from overhead, branches. A dragonfly hovered near a flowering bush and darted away. Everything was bathed in honey-colored light, the kind that makes everything look softer, even sharper at the same time. But not every eye saw the beauty in that light. From behind a partially drawn curtain, someone was watching. She sat on a porch that was just a little too pristine. Her teacup rested untouched beside her. Her gaze followed Marcus with a stillness that wasn't curiosity. It was calculation. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and her lips pressed into a tight line. Her hand moved toward her phone, not hurried, but deliberate. She didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't see a man enjoying his run. She saw something else, or rather, she chose to. But Marcus didn't know this yet. To him, the street was just another path. The next block, the next corner. He adjusted his earbuds slightly, letting one side hang so he could stay aware of his surroundings. A habit, not paranoia. A learned behavior, like breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. He passed. A mailbox decorated with tiny American flags. A wind spinner shaped like a sunflower turned slowly in a neighbor's yard. The smell of fresh-cut grass lingered in the air. He was almost at the halfway point. Almost time to turn back. But this time, something felt different. Not loud, just a slight shift in the air, like the way the forest goes quiet right before a storm. A car door slammed somewhere nearby. A low rumble of tires on pavement. Then, 2. Marcus slowed a little, not because he was tired, but because he was listening. He felt it in his chest before he even turned his head. But for now, he kept running. Because in that moment, before the peace shattered, before the questions, the assumptions, the judgment, he still had this rhythm, and he would hold on to it as long as he could. The porch was spotless, white railings freshly painted, flower boxes brimming with petunias in rigid color order, purple, white, red. A ceramic welcome sign hung crooked beside the door, though its message felt half-hearted. Evelyn stood with her arms crossed just beyond the screen door. Early 50s, short blonde bob perfectly combed, lips pressed into a permanent line of disapproval. She wore a pale blue sweater despite the warmth, buttoned up to the top, sleeves folded neatly at her wrists. She didn't sit, didn't sip the tea that had long gone cold beside her. She watched. Her gaze was hard, sharp, unblinking, as it followed Marcus jogging down the sidewalk. She didn't recognize him. Not from the HOA meetings, not from Sunday brunch at the neighborhood cafe, not even from her cautious perusals of the community Facebook group. He wasn't familiar. And in Evelyn's mind, unfamiliar often carried a warning. Her eyes narrowed. The jogger's steady pace, his calm expression, his lack of eye contact, it didn't reassure her. It unsettled her. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He didn't try to make her feel at ease. He just existed. And that was enough. She pulled out her phone. The screen lit up instantly, no hesitation. She scrolled past a few notifications, past a neighborhood safety app she checked daily. Her thumb hovered for half a second before tapping the contact she had saved under non-emergency police. But this time, she didn't hesitate before, pressing the call icon. As the phone rang, she stepped slightly forward. Not enough to be seen clearly, just enough to see him. "Yes, hello," she said, her voice low, controlled, and deliberately calm. "There's a man, a black man, running down Oak Ridge and turning onto Maplewood. He's wearing a hoodie. He looks out of place. I don't feel safe." She emphasized the last sentence with a subtle tremor, though her face remained stone. There was no panic in her voice. No fear either. Just certainty. Just assumption wrapped in faux concern. She didn't mention that he hadn't spoken to her. She didn't mention that he hadn't stopped, hadn't even slowed, hadn't looked her way. She didn't mention the stillness of the street or the distant sound of children laughing. Her world narrowed to that one man, his skin color, and her discomfort. And somehow, that was enough. She ended the call with a nod to herself, as if she'd done her civic duty, as if she'd protected something fragile, something pure. Inside her house, the local news murmured in the background, talk of crime rates, vague terms like urban unrest, politicians promising safety first. Evelyn didn't consider herself biased. She voted, donated to charity, even tutored underprivileged children once a month, on Zoom. But in her bones, there was an old instinct, one she never questioned, one that whispered, "He doesn't belong here." As Marcus moved farther down the street, unaware of the phone call, Evelyn remained on the porch, eyes fixed on his back. She watched how his arms swung in rhythm, how his stride never faltered. There was grace in his motion, something fluid and practiced. But to her it looked calculated, too calm, too composed. She didn't see discipline. She saw danger. She didn't see an athlete or a coach or a neighbor. She saw a stranger, and that was all it took. Behind her, the tea had gone completely cold. Flies buzzed softly around the rim. But she didn't notice. Her world had shifted into hyperfocus. A scenario played out in her head, not one based on reality, but on the fears she fed with nightly news cycles and the quiet paranoia of gated privilege. She imagined what he might be carrying. She imagined what he might be planning. She imagined, because she never asked, She didn't consider that maybe he'd lived here once, long before the house prices rose. She didn't wonder if maybe he was visiting someone who lived nearby. She never paused to think he could be someone deeply rooted in this town's quiet heart. All she saw was difference. All she needed was a reason. As minutes passed, she heard it. The faint whoosh of tires, slow and steady. A cruiser. Then another. They didn't have their sirens on, just quiet presence. She took a long breath and turned her gaze back to the street. A flicker of self-importance warmed her chest. She had acted. In her mind, she'd taken control of a situation that no one else had noticed. That made her feel powerful, justified. But across the street, a little girl had been drawing on the sidewalk with colored chalk, unnoticed by Evelyn. She looked up now, curious at the patrol cars. Her doodles, smiling suns, clouds, the word peace stretched along the concrete. The girl watched the jogger slow his pace as the police approached. Her mother called her inside gently. She obeyed, but not before glancing once more at Marcus. Confused. The man didn't look dangerous. He looked tired. On the porch, Evelyn finally moved. She straightened her sweater, sat down, lifted her tea but didn't drink. Somewhere deep in the part of her heart she rarely visited, something shifted. Barely. Not regret. Not yet. But the beginning of something. A crack in the certainty. A pause in the pattern. And just beyond her hedges, a conversation was about to unfold that she could never have predicted. The sound of tires against asphalt was soft, barely noticeable. No sirens, no flashing lights, just two black and white patrol cars gliding around the corner like silent shadows. They moved in slow synchrony, a practiced rhythm, deliberate and calm, the kind of entrance meant to observe before acting. Marcus heard them before he saw them. He didn't turn around immediately. He didn't stop. He let his legs carry him a few more strides until instinct told him it was time. Then he slowed, not dramatically, not with guilt, but with awareness. His arms dropped to his sides. The earbuds came out. The low hum of music vanished, replaced by the soft click of car doors opening. He exhaled slowly, controlled, deep. Not from fear, but from weariness. This wasn't new. He had rehearsed this moment in his head too many times over the years. Not out of paranoia, but out of necessity. The choreography was familiar. Slow your pace, show your hands, speak clearly, stay calm. He turned and faced them. Two officers stepped out. Both white, both in their mid-30s. One had a buzz cut and mirrored sunglasses. The other looked younger, more hesitant. Neither reached for their weapons, but their hands hovered near their belts, habit, muscle memory. Marcus raised a hand slightly. Open palm. Not a wave, just enough to say, I see you, and I'm not a threat. His voice was clear, measured, not too loud, not too soft. Afternoon, officers. Is there a problem? His eyes were steady, his shoulders square. He didn't flinch. But inside, under the surface of his composed exterior, there was a familiar ache, a silent question that lived deep in his bones. How many times do I have to prove I belong? The lead officer stepped forward, glancing down at Marcus's running shoes, then at the hoodie clinging to his frame. We got a call. Someone reported a suspicious person in the neighborhood. Said you were acting unusual. Marcus almost laughed. Not out of humor, but disbelief. His voice didn't waver. I was jogging. There was a pause. A long one. The kind that stretches time, stretches nerves. Birds chirped in the trees. A sprinkler clicked on somewhere nearby. Even the breeze felt like it was holding its breath. Behind them, Evelyn watched from her porch like a judge from a distance. Arms crossed, chin lifted. Her face wore the smugness of someone who felt confirmed in her worst assumptions. This was what she expected to see. Officers standing tall, a black man being questioned, the order of things being restored. Marcus saw her. He didn't need to guess who made the call. She hadn't even tried to hide it. He recognized the stance, the stare, the rigid posture of self-justification. He'd seen it before. In parking lots, in elevators, in store aisles where eyes lingered too long and voices whispered when they thought he couldn't hear. The younger officer looked uncertain. His eyes scanned Marcus's face, then his shirt, then the sheen of sweat on his brow, the earbuds in his hand. There was no aggression, no signs of erratic behavior, no threat, just a man who'd been running. The older officer seemed less convinced, or perhaps just more conditioned. "Can I see some ID?" Marcus didn't argue. He reached into his back, pocket slowly, deliberately, and pulled out his wallet. Every motion was practiced, smooth. He handed over his license without comment. The officer took it, glanced down, and paused. Something shifted. A flicker of confusion. Then something closer to recognition. "Marcus Bennett?" The officer looked up again, this time more closely. The name stirred something, an echo of a headline, a community bulletin, a memory perhaps. "Wait, are you the one who runs that after-school track club? The one at Lincoln Park?" Marcus nodded once. "Yeah, that's me." The silence returned, but it was different now, thicker, heavier, the weight of realization. The younger officer spoke for the first time. "My nephew's on that team. Coach Bennett. He talks about you all the time." Marcus offered a faint smile. Not smug, not triumphant. Just tired. Small world. The shift was immediate. Postures relaxed. Tension bled from their shoulders. The clipboard that had been pulled out was slid quietly back into the cruiser. The buzz-cut officer scratched the back of his neck, suddenly uncomfortable. "Sorry for the trouble. We just had to check it out, you know how it is." Marcus nodded again, though deep inside, he did know. Too well. He knew how often checking it out meant being presumed guilty until proven harmless. How often it meant being asked to justify your own presence in your own country, your own neighborhood, your own skin. He didn't lash out, didn't deliver a lecture. He simply said, "Yeah, I know how it is." Across the street, Evelyn still watched. Her face had shifted, not completely but noticeably. The officers hadn't placed him in cuffs. They weren't interrogating him. They were talking, nodding, even smiling now. Her eyes narrowed again, not out of suspicion this time, but confusion. Her certainty was cracking. The narrative she built in her head didn't match the reality in front of her. Marcus put his earbuds back in, his breathing even. Calm restored, not given, but reclaimed. He gave a short wave to the younger officer, who returned it with a nod of respect. Then he turned back down the path and continued his run. His stride, though steady, now carried a different weight. Not of fear, not even of anger, but of the burden of being seen, and still not truly known. The younger officer lingered. While his partner stepped back toward the cruiser, checking something on his tablet, the junior cop remained still, eyes narrowed. Not in suspicion now, but in concentration. His gaze scanned Marcus's face with a flicker of hesitation, as though dusting off an old memory hidden in the back of his mind. Something about the jogger felt familiar. The way he held himself, the steady voice, even the kindness tucked carefully behind his quiet demeanor. Then came the shift. His brows lifted. His lips parted slightly, not to speak, but in realization. The kind of realization that doesn't hit all at once, but blooms slowly across the face like dawn breaking over uncertain skies. "Wait, are you Coach Marcus?" Marcus's smile was subtle. Not smug, not mocking. Just a soft curve of the lips, a flicker of memory brushing across his face. "Haven't heard that name in a while." And just like that, everything changed. The officer's face lit up with sudden clarity, eyes wide now, not with fear, but recognition. A warmth stirred in his voice, cutting through the stagnant air like a breeze after too much stillness. Coach Marcus from Lincoln Park? You're the one who helped my cousin, Darius. You got him into state with that scholarship. He never stops talking about you. Said you changed his whole life, man." Marcus laughed lightly, genuine now. Darius. "Yeah, kid could run like the wind. Just needed someone to believe in him." The officer's shoulders dropped as if he'd been holding up a weight he didn't realize until that moment. His mouth moved again, slower this time. "You're the guy who started the youth running club, right? The Saturday morning sessions, free for the neighborhood kids?" Marcus nodded. "Still do, every weekend. Been trying to keep the next generation
moving, you know? And just like that, the tension that had wrapped itself around the moment, thick and unspoken, began to dissolve. Not instantly, not all at once, but piece by piece. The junior officer's stance softened, eyes now gleaming,
with something dangerously close to admiration. The badge on his chest didn't change, the uniform didn't loosen, but the wall between them began to crumble. He took a small step forward, almost sheepishly. "I'm sorry, man. I didn't recognize you. I mean, we get calls, we have to check them out, but if I'd known." Marcus raised a hand gently. "It's all right. You didn't come at me sideways. You listened. That counts." In the distance, the sun had begun its slow descent, throwing golden hues across the street. Shadows stretched longer, softer. On the porch, Evelyn stood frozen. She couldn't hear their words, but the tone had shifted unmistakably. No handcuffs, no escalation, no confrontation, just conversation. The smugness in her expression faltered. Her arms, still crossed, loosened. A seed of uncertainty took root behind her eyes. She had called with conviction. She'd acted on instinct. She believed she knew the truth. But the scene unfolding before her didn't match the script in her head. She didn't expect the officers to smile. She didn't expect the man she feared to be known, respected, admired, and worse, she didn't expect to be invisible in the moment that followed. The older officer returned, holding the tablet in one hand, expression unreadable. He paused as he saw the smile between Marcus and his partner, the relaxed posture, the shift in atmosphere. "Everything good here?" he asked, voice slightly more guarded now. The younger officer nodded quickly. "Yeah, more than good. This is Coach Marcus. He helped my cousin get into college. He runs the Lincoln Park program." The senior officer paused, glanced once at Marcus's ID, then back at the man himself. He gave a short nod, less out of apology, more out of acknowledgement. "Thanks for your time," he said simply. Marcus slid his ID back into his pocket, earbuds still dangling from one hand. He looked from one officer to the other, then past them to the porch where Evelyn stood, arms now lowered. He didn't stare. He didn't gloat. He just let his presence speak. "I belong here." Without another word, Marcus nodded to the officers and turned to resume his run. This time his steps were lighter, not because the burden was gone, but because just for a moment the world had tilted slightly toward fairness. The junior officer watched him go, then turned to his partner. "Man, can you imagine? All that over a jog?" His partner didn't answer. He didn't have to. Back on the porch, Evelyn slowly sank into her chair. Her hands rested on her lap now, palms open. The script had changed. She had expected to be the hero of this story, the watchful neighbor, the protector. Instead, she had watched the so-called suspicious man become a mentor, a lifeline, a name that sparked gratitude and respect in the mouth of a uniformed officer. She felt something uncomfortable press against her chest. Not shame, not yet, but the first whisper of it. Something had cracked, and light was beginning to slip through. From her porch, Evelyn Cross sat stiffly in her wrought iron chair, one hand still resting on her phone, even though the call had long ended. The screen had gone dark, but her mind hadn't. Her jaw was tight, tighter than it had been when she'd dialed the police, tighter than it had been while she'd watched him jog past her house, tighter now as she watched the scene unfolding, so different from what she'd prepared for. The two officers, her officers, The ones who were supposed to handle the problem were standing casually beside the black man she had reported. They weren't restraining him. They weren't raising their voices. They weren't even suspicious anymore. They were smiling. And worse, they shook his hand. Evelyn blinked. Once. Twice. The image didn't change. It only grew more vivid in the golden haze of the late afternoon sun. There were no handcuffs, no raised voices, no commands barked through gritted teeth. There was respect. The officers didn't just know him. They admired him. Her face, once stone-cold with certainty, began to shift. Not into victory, not into relief, but into something harder to swallow. Confusion, and the beginnings of embarrassment. This wasn't the ending she expected. She had been so sure. He didn't belong. He didn't smile. He wore a hoodie. He was sweating. He was running, for heaven's sake. What was he running from? That question, once so loud in her mind, now felt childish, shrill, uninformed, and now she could hear the officers laughing with him. Not mockingly, genuinely. One of them even slapped him gently on the back like you would with an old friend or mentor. Evelyn's heart thudded in her chest, but not from danger, from exposure. She had thought herself vigilant, careful, protective of her quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. But now she wondered, had she simply been biased? The man she feared turned out to be someone they all seemed to know, not from mugshots, not from incident reports, but from stories, from impact, from gratitude. She overheard bits of conversation, drifting toward her like confetti in the wind. Got my cousin into college. Still volunteers every weekend. Coach Marcus, man. He's a legend around here. Coach Marcus. The name meant nothing to her before. Now it clanged in her ears like a bell she should have heard long ago. He wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a threat. He was a pillar. And she was the one who had tried to bring him down with a single call. Her stomach churned, not because of what he did, but because of what she had done. She hadn't asked his name, hadn't offered a wave or a greeting or even a nod. She hadn't tried to see. She had assumed. From a distance, Marcus glanced once toward her house. Their eyes met. It was brief, just a flicker, a moment, but it landed like a stone in her gut. He didn't glare. He didn't shake his head or roll his eyes. He didn't smile either. He just looked. Calm. Unbothered. Complete. A man who didn't need her approval to know his worth. A man who had long since stopped asking for it. And in that quiet, piercing moment, Evelyn felt something in herself shift. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't immediate. But it was real. The narrative in her mind, the one where she was the alert citizen, the one who saw what others didn't, had cracked, fractured, because she hadn't seen clearly at all. She hadn't seen the mentor. She hadn't seen the leader. She hadn't seen the good man jogging through her neighborhood, listening to music, carrying the weight of history on his shoulders while still trying to uplift everyone around him. She had only seen his skin, and that truth stung more than anything. Across the street, the officers returned to their cruisers. One of them gave Marcus a final nod, a respectful farewell. Marcus offered a quiet, short wave in return before turning away. His run resumed, but something had changed. Not in his pace, not in his breathing, but in the way the world now watched him. Not through suspicion, but through recognition. Evelyn stayed seated, her spine now curved slightly, as though the weight of her own misunderstanding was pressing down hard. In her hand, the phone remained idle. The same phone she had used to summon judgment. The same phone that could have ended a good man's day or life in a very different way. She set it down. For the first time in a long while, she had nothing to say. No complaint to make, no call to dial, no certainty to hold on to. Only questions. Why had she assumed the worst? And how many other good men had suffered under the shadow of that same assumption? The sky above her deepened into amber. The laughter of children echoed faintly down the block. mingling with the rhythmic sound of Marcus's feet hitting the pavement. In the distance, steady, strong, and unshaken. The world, it seemed, had room to grow, and maybe, just maybe, so did she. The sidewalk stretched ahead like a ribbon of warmth, sun-kissed and golden in the final hour of the day. Marcus jogged on. His breathing had steadied again, but it felt lighter now, less like an escape, more like a return. The tension that had clung to his shoulders for the past half hour was slowly peeling away, like mist dissolving under sunlight. His strides were smooth, familiar. Each footfall tapping into the rhythm he'd built over years of running, training, teaching. But it wasn't just muscle memory anymore. It was something deeper. It was clarity. Behind him, the patrol cars had driven off, engines low and unhurried. The woman on the porch had shrunk into the shadows of her own silence. The street had returned to its peaceful quiet, the kind that almost pretends nothing ever happened. But he knew. And so did the people watching. Half a block ahead, a wooden gate creaked open, and a burst of laughter spilled out onto the street. A small boy, no older than 8, darted from the yard, barefoot and grinning, a juice box still clutched in his hand. His curly hair bounced with each step, and his voice cut through the hush like a note of joy. "Coach Marcus." "Hey." Marcus slowed, smiled. He always did when it was the kids. The boy skidded to a stop on the edge of the sidewalk, panting, lightly with excitement, eyes wide like he'd just spotted a superhero mid-flight. "Are we still practicing on Saturday?" Marcus chuckled, wiping sweat from his brow with the sleeve of his hoodie. He crouched slightly so the boy didn't have to crane his neck. "Of course we are. Wouldn't miss it for the world." The boy beamed, fist pumped the air, and spun, back toward the gate, shouting to someone unseen. "He said, 'Yes, Mom, practice is on.'" Marcus laughed gently, not loudly, but in that soft, private way you do when something pure touches you. The boy disappeared into the yard again, but the warmth lingered. It stayed with Marcus as he stood upright, rolled his shoulders back, and resumed his jog. It wasn't just about practice. It never had been. It was about consistency. Showing up. Being present. Even when the world tried to erase you, doubt you, shrink you down into a single narrative. He was still here, every Saturday, rain or shine. He showed up for kids who needed someone to believe in them, for boys and girls who hadn't yet learned the world might judge them before it saw them. He ran not to escape, but to lead. Block by block, the familiar houses passed by. Some with porch swings, others with wind chimes, bicycles on lawns, garden, gnomes watching silently from flower beds. All parts of a neighborhood that had learned something new today, even if they wouldn't admit it yet. A dog barked from behind a fence, its tail wagging. A sprinkler clicked to life in someone's front yard, casting tiny rainbows into the air. The world was still turning, but something had shifted. Marcus could feel it, even if the street looked the same. He thought about the woman on the porch. Her frown, her folded arms, her certainty. And then he thought about the officer who had called him Coach Marcus, like it was a title earned in gold. About the boy who ran to him with joy, not fear. About Darius and all the other kids whose stories had been rewritten because someone believed they could run farther than they thought possible. And about how, even today, especially today, he had reminded them of that again. Not with speeches, not with protests, but with presence, with one steady breath after another, by simply being who he was. The jogger, the mentor, the man behind the headline someone else tried to write for him. Ahead, the sky began to dim into dusky lavender, streaks of orange and mauve stretching across the clouds. The day was coming to a close, but his work wasn't. There would be more Saturdays, more runs, more kids waiting on sidewalks with hopeful eyes, more moments where someone might mistake his existence for a threat, but there would also be more recognition, more reminders, more truth rising quietly in the spaces where judgment used to live. Marcus ran forward, hoodie rustling in the wind, earbuds back in place. The music started up again, Soft beats, steady rhythm. The world could try to mislabel him. But he'd already written his own story, and he wasn't stopping. Not now. Not ever. The street was quiet again, not just in sound, but in spirit, as if the air itself had paused to reflect on what had just unfolded. A woman sat alone on her porch, the sun casting long, slanted shadows across her lawn. Her fingers toyed with her phone, now just a device without purpose. A silent witness to a choice, one she couldn't take back. A man jogged into the distance, his figure shrinking against the golden horizon, steady as ever. And in between them, something unspoken lingered, a lesson, a truth. One that didn't arrive in shouts or anger, but in the quiet resolve of a man who chose not to fight with fists or fury, but with presence. Because fear is often loud. It rushes in with assumptions. It raises alarms before asking questions. It convinces people that safety looks only one way, and danger another. Fear tells a story long before it knows the ending. But truth is different. Truth is steady. Truth runs at its own pace. Truth doesn't demand attention. It earns it. And sometimes truth looks like a man jogging past hydrangea bushes and mailboxes. A man with calloused feet and a warm smile, who gives his weekends to kids that aren't his own. A man who could have yelled, could have stormed, could have broken under the weight of judgment, but didn't. Because he knew who he was. He didn't need the world to validate it. He only needed to keep going. Too often, people are taught to fear what they don't recognize. Skin too dark, clothes too casual, steps too confident. But not everyone who doesn't belong is a threat. Sometimes they're exactly what the community needs. Sometimes they're the anchor, the person who keeps others from drifting away, the one who listens, teaches, uplifts, the one whose legacy lives in the lives they've touched, not the ones who judge them. Coach Marcus was never looking for applause. He wasn't chasing gratitude. He was simply being present, being committed, being more than the narrative handed to him. He was silent power, the kind that doesn't roar, but reverberates, that kind that echoes in every kid he mentored. In every second chance he helped someone grab. In every officer who remembered the man before the hoodie, before the assumptions, before the call. There was no spotlight, no viral clip, no grand apology, only a man continuing his run. And a neighborhood, quietly forced to question what it thinks it knows. People often ask what change looks like. They imagine marches, megaphones, policies. But sometimes change looks like a man in motion, unbothered, unshaken, unstoppable. Sometimes it looks like a child running to greet him, not because he's famous, but because he's safe, because he shows up, because he keeps his word. Sometimes it looks like an officer lowering his guard because truth disarmed him faster than suspicion ever could. And sometimes it looks like a woman on a porch, watching the truth unravel her fear and having no choice but to sit with it. Because truth doesn't always come to confront. Sometimes it just passes by at a steady pace, giving you the choice to follow or stay behind. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long golden lines across that quiet street, one thing became clear. We don't always get to choose how truth arrives, but we do get to choose whether or not we listen. So next time, before the phone is picked up, before the mind jumps ahead, before fear shouts louder than reason, pause. Ask. See, because the person who doesn't look like they belong might just be the one who's holding everything together. The unsung protector, the community's quiet foundation, the hero without a cape, the silent power we never knew we needed.